Are you ready to set your family and children up for success in this school year? Well, I'm going to give you some tips to help you. So I'm going to start with some adjustment hacks, and a few adjustment hacks are focused on setting ourselves up for success. What is one of the biggest challenges that we can face in our day-to-day struggles with school? Getting out the door and everything ready on time, right? I know I'm guilty of that as a mom, and that was something that was the biggest stressor and obstacle that my daughter and I faced many mornings in our school year ventures. So what can you do to reduce this stress and create a morning that has more connectability, more comfort, and more ease? Well, like in many other areas of life, planning and preparing are ideal ways to set this situation up for success. Some of the common things that we can prepare and plan for are the food prep or lunch situations that we're navigating for that next day. If it's lunch money or any of those things you need, set it out, put it away, have it established where it needs to be the night before when everybody's starting to wind down instead of the morning of when everything is spiraling up. If you're packing lunches, do as much of the prep as possible the night before. You can even include your kids in this activity if they're young, and if they're of age, make this one of their responsibilities if you have a busy lifestyle or just want to give them some ownership over their own functionality in life. Another great thing to prepare is setting out your clothes. Maybe not everything, and I know that sometimes we have kids that have sensory issues, or we have, we want to decide on that day. But you could set a few outfits out or have some ideas of outfits so that it's not that struggle in the morning. If you're really struggling with them getting, showered in the morning or things like that, talk to your teen, talk to your child, or reposition your younger one for prepping that in the evening before. And this isn't about time management, although that's a piece of it. The bigger piece to me as a coach is when you set the morning up to be successful and to be comfortable, now you're starting to reduce other triggering activities such as stress, anxiety about the day, or just waking up and not feeling quite, at your best, and that can trigger lots of other challenges that your child is already struggling with and facing. So the more stress focused we have our morning, the more likely you're also going to be encountering those things. The less stressful and more comfortable and easy the morning is, the less that you're going to likely have a flare-up of that. And if you do, you're already in a space to be able to address that. So that is a very important hack, again, not just for time management, but for setting the social and emotional tone for your child's day and the whole family in general, because I know as adults and parents, it can help us emotionally and mentally process and start our day as well. So that's a big adjustment hack. The other one is really having those conversation pieces to where you're talking about things that set your child up for success. So a lot of times we talk about, the dislikes or the struggles or the hardships of school, but we really need to spend an equal or focused amount of time on what's going well or what could go well. And as parents, we can support our kids by coaching them through how to break through some of those barriers. So let's say your child is struggling with knowing how to create friendships. A great talking point is to sit down and say, well, who are the people that are in your class or classes, and who are you interested in making friends with, and why are you interested in making friends with those people, or what about those people in your class, like who have you noticed that you would like to get to know a little better and see if there's something that can build. And so we're coaching our children, we're guiding our children on how to start processing the function of moving into friendships and building relationships. And then you can further that by giving them tips or supports. Oh, okay, so you see that they have the same kind of backpack that you have. So maybe they like the same thing. If you want to start a conversation, ask them about that thing. Ask them if you like that. And that's a great conversation starter. For our older kids, it can be kind of the same thing, but more invitational. If there's somebody that they're interested in building a dynamic with or wanting to see if there's some sort of potential connection, then they can go up and do an invitational. Hey, have you ever listened to this band, or have you seen this new trend? And you can start a conversation and also filter out if that's a similar interest. So the concept here, in whatever way you choose to do it, is about also guiding our children through those social and those emotional aspects of not just addressing the hardships, which is absolutely important, but setting them up for success so that they don't feel so distanced or isolated within those hardships, because they also have tools of how to put themselves out there and how to navigate some of those sometimes uncomfortable and challenging new ventures of growing up and meeting new people and things of that nature. So those are a couple important adjustment hacks that I think are just good practice all around the board. Now, the other piece of why I wanted to do this was to address some of the big issues that I see as a social and emotional expert in my coaching practice. One of those is stress. I am seeing more and more elementary age children present with stress and related anxiety and depression disorders from the stress or pressure, right? So the stress when our young ones is really seen as pressure, and it's felt physically in symptoms of not feeling good in their belly or having trouble sleeping, or if you see changes in their eating habits. All of these things can be signs that your child is basically over pressurized because of something that's happening within the school year or the structure of the school system. So a hack on that is to proactively understand that in our, at least the Western culture of school systems, there is not time for children to decompress within the day, meaning they don't have downtime where they typically, spend some time reading a book in class unless a teacher initiates that. They don't, within the structure of the school system, have regular daily playground time where it's just free play, where they get to learn how to socialize, get to get their energy out in whatever way that is. Yes, they have PE and they have structured curricular activities, but again, those are structured, those are organized, and there's rules and there's order, which isn't a bad thing, but it also means that it's not that decompression time for our kids. There's also a high demand on being still, sitting, paying attention, listening, and all of us with younger kids understand that that's difficult for many of them to do, and it's not always age appropriate for the extent that they have to do it. On top of that, testing is a big thing that pulls in and creates a lot of stress and anxiety for young ones. And these are just factors that are within our structure of learning. So not to pick apart or say anything negative about those, but they don't really match and necessarily support the natural growth and development of our children, especially our younger children who haven't gotten practice and learned how to manage through these processes. So one of the proactive things that we can do is we can support downtime when our kids, ideally before school, if there's enough time, to get them just centered and either their wiggles out, or if that kind of kid, or just to decompress watching a cartoon or doing something like that. But definitely after school. After school, not even if they're in an after school program or a daycare program, once they get home and they're truly unconnected to that overstimulation of socializing and structure and order and things like that, when they finally get home and it's like, whew, my space, now I just get to let down all of that pressure, all of those guards. I think it is essential that we do our best as parents to try to structure in a decompression time, especially before we start laying more demands on top of our child. And again, not saying that there aren't supposed to be expectations and things that have to get done, but understanding that what's going to set our child up for success and reduce stress, which will reduce anxiety and reduce depressive emerging symptoms and things of that nature, is to allow them to decompress. And it can be 15 minutes, it can be 10 minutes, it can be 20 minutes, Work it into a schedule that works for you and for the family, but that decompression time is essential just for them maintaining balance, their basic mental, emotional, and biological balance, as well as being able to process through everything that has happened within that day. So that's an adjustment hack that we can do right off the rip without there being issues or having any issues happening within the family framework. Now, specifically to where I see stress and anxiety and sometimes depressive symptoms show up in our youth is that there are a lot of social challenges that come with being in school. And we've always had those, right? But we had less structure in all other areas of our lives, and there were different systems within our society to work through those things. And that's definitely shifted in a way that, again, I think children are feeling much more pressurized. So important pieces is to support and to guide our children through these times, through these situations, as well as to know when to reach out for help. So there's a few things that we can do. So the first thing to support is that we have to make sure that we're depressurized enough as a parent to be approachable and also to have active listening available when our child tries to tell us about difficult things that they're feeling or difficult things that we're experiencing. And I know how hard that can be as a parent when we ourselves are feeling pressurized in our own life and our own environment. But this is about rising above that and etching out success within these structures. So when we know that we have to be aware of our own capacity for being able to sit down, have that awareness, have those conversations, well, now we're already a step ahead in being able to get in and intervene and support our children as soon as possible so that they don't have to sit and really build upon those difficult challenges. The other thing when it comes to anxiety specifically, reminding your child through conversation and through, there's some practical activities that you can do that they are safe. They are emotionally safe. We do that by being available and by being actively responsive in a positive, loving, and nurturing way to what they're communicating with us, but also in having conversations and communicating the strength of the family, the strength of the love that we have for them, the strength of support that they have in our life. Because a lot of times for our youth, anxiety comes when they don't feel that they are emotionally or socially secure. And that's the most common root of anxiety in our younger, minor children. So if we can get ahead of that and really make it a practice to reinforce the loving, positive, supportive foundation that does exist in the family, that is already helping your child have a place to stand securely in those different feelings. Also, reminding your children that feelings are, they're not every feeling means that there's a truth behind it. So not every feeling means that something bad is going to happen, like an anxious feeling or a worry feeling. That sometimes it's just normal for us to have feelings, but that there's nothing that we need to do with it as far as taking action. There's not a problem behind it. We can talk to somebody about it. We can do some activities, like if your child is having a high level of worries, you can have a worry box or a worry basket where your child writes those worries down and puts it in the basket. They can blow it into a bubble and send it away. And the idea is for your children to learn the process of having a feeling and acknowledging that it's there and it's bothering them, but not holding it and creating something around it. So the bubble, they can let it go, and if they're having these same worries, these same thoughts, then there's a need to talk about it. the worry box or the worry basket, the same thing. If as a parent you're monitoring that, which I do recommend, especially younger children, but if you're monitoring that and you see there's a repeated theme, then that signals to you as a parent, hey, there might be something more going on. Let me sit down, let me have a conversation with my child, and let me see how I can step in and support, guide, coach, teach, or if we need to reach out and get some help. There are definitely, when I work with kids, I always try to identify what is the source of the worry, what's the pattern within the worry, and then I align specific tools, supports, and coaching practices to help them resolve those issues. So I know it's really hard to do, just there's not a one size fits all kind of approach, but just the willingness to have an engagement with your child and to try to help support them in ways so that it doesn't get to that point is already a big step forward. Also, let's face it, when we look at what's happening in the school system as kids get older, I've worked with a number of high school age kids and even into the middle school where there's a couple things going on. One, they're struggling with real adult issues as far as big family dynamic issues, big family dynamic problems, and that does create a challenge in their effort to develop, right? So like as they're growing, all of our kids, not only are they going to school, not only are they in extracurricular activities, not only are they having to keep up with our rules and responsibilities, which I think is important too, but they're also learning how to be a functional, independent human being. They're learning what emotions are. They're learning what to do with these emotions. They're learning about the reactions of their emotions. They're learning how to navigate those different feelings, what works well, what doesn't work well, what creates a positive consequence or response, what doesn't. And the more disorder or dysfunction that is around a child, the more likely they are to have a mislearning in that process. And that's something that I really specialize in as a coach, but that's something that is a pivotal piece in their social and emotional development. So as parents, we can't organize everything in their life, and we can't block out every dysfunction. But knowing and recognizing when it's time to get some supports and help so that the effects of that dysfunction are not landing so heavily or impacting our child so deeply is important. And also being able to properly address the dysfunction. So some things are best discussed at an age appropriate level and acknowledged, and then supported in a way where your child knows that there's not a need for them to take ownership, because that's a big piece that our children self-impose their own stress and anxiety, because as kids they feel they lean towards a heavy sense of responsibility in places where they have no control and really therefore cannot take any ownership and have no true responsibility to creating the changes. So sometimes having an age-appropriate conversation, and if it needs to be supported by a professional, please do that. But an age-appropriate conversation that acknowledges that this is here, but that it's not theirs to own. And then having that follow-up conversation on how can I support you through this process. Maybe as an adult you're working to change it, but you can't just snap a finger and change it overnight. So we can ask though, what can I do to support you? What can I do to help you, manage all the different feelings and the different thoughts that are coming along with this? Because not only are our kids learning how to process their thoughts, but their brain development is moving all throughout their developmental process. So it's not even until they get to puberty up till 23, 24 that the brain actually stops developing as far as its formative structure. The prefrontal cortex kicks in at that puberty to young adult age. So this whole brain development, is taking shape and is happening. So our kids are doing a lot of work in just forming themselves as that forever human being, basically, to the baseline of that forever human being to take off and move from. So it's really important. The key piece to supporting is making sure that those social conversations are happening. So social meaning what are positive choices, what are different ways to handle negative situations, what are good social cues, like all of that context around peer relations, around a minor to an authority figure, all the different aspects that go along with the social framework of our child. They need to be discussed. They need to be guided, not just free flowing, because free flowing, with the speed at which we're moving in society, as far as all the demands, how fast time moves. I hear kids saying that, and I remember as a child I thought time was like molasses. So there's not the same environment for our kids to naturally progress in their development socially, without the intervened guidance and supportive parents. And the same happens emotionally. So we really need to have a pulse on what's happening, but we also need to take a driver's wheel in making sure that we're, again, coaching and guiding our kids in those ways. As they get up to those high school, especially transitioning from high school into the college years, this is a whole different phase of parenting, that is very challenging, and it's where I see sometimes a big conflict eruption between parents and the minors, their children. And the biggest challenge that I see is the fight of our kids to say, no, I'm independent and I want more independence, and the argument of parents saying, I don't see it and I'm not ready to change anything about our dynamic. And obviously going to one or the other position probably isn't the best approach. The best approach is for us to work as parents to grow with our children, which is very challenging, and again, a social emotional demand on ourselves. But we have to realize that we're raising adult human beings. I mean, enjoying our children through the developmental years, definitely a prime aspect of life. But the reality is the majority of our child's lifespan is going to be spent as an independent adult. And our job, our role as parents, is to support, to model, to coach, to guide, and to represent that movement and that development as best as possible. So that means that the mother or the father that we are to our 4-year-old child can't be the same that we are to our 18-year-old child. There's a conflict there. There's a disruption there. And what's going to happen is it typically breaks down the relationship that we have with our kids. And as parents, we're left not understanding why. And as children, we're left frustrated and feeling like we did something wrong, or we rebel against that system because we can't live under a 4-year-old framework. We're 18 years old and growing. So the biggest thing that I coach to when I'm working with that age bracket, when I'm talking to parents, is about we need to grow with our children. We need to get clear on what our expectations are. We need to communicate those expectations. And then we also need to allow a safe space of independence around them learning their own choices and the consequences of their choices. So throughout all of childhood, I think it's really important for us as parents to explain what we expect. And those expectations need to be clear and need to be communicated from all parties, so the parent side to the child side or children's side.